Hi people, welcome to Blu UK Jazz Dance. You're in the Blue Lab. 1986 was an important year for the commercialization of UK Jazz Dance. UK Jazz Dance is an umbrella term for UK underground jazz dance styles, okay? It was the make it or break it for the dance in the commercial world. And it was the break it. I was involved in part of the commercial world, but I was involved in the arts world. I was an individual who was recognized, without a doubt, as being one of the most avant-garde, bohemian, experimental UK jazz dancers in the city. Manchester was the leading experimental, avant-garde, bohemian, had the leading experimental culture of any city. People need to understand that. And it was due partly to us being the first modern city, what's in the city already, Art Deco buildings, our history of buildings, most importantly because we had the leading DJs played in the north of England, played in Manchester at our all days. That brought amazing battles that would happen at all days and in clubs. People got that. The all days, all nighters were absolutely, I can't explain to anybody what dancing I saw there. I've seen the best dancers in Manchester. I didn't have to move anywhere because Manchester had a 7-day-a-week culture. And it was one that was avant-garde. It was experimental at its highest level. Dancers did not rely upon DJs for music. They bought their own music because all the pioneer dancers found music to develop the styles. And in 1986, the work of some amazing dancers, jazz defectors, they had a mambo, jazz, soul, sort of ballet style. They had a group from London, from Birmingham, amazing dancers, Jazz 5. They had a very, very contemporary ballet style. All of them were avant-garde, but they, then they had IDJ from London. What happened was a film called Absolute Beginners was being made. You'll hear me talk about it, but it's a significant film. And basically, they were supposed to be in the film. JD's, Jazz 5 and IDJ. They were all representatives. JD, Jazz Defectors were representing the north of England. Jazz 5 were representing Midlands and IDJ. And it was a clever marketing tool from Absolute Beginners. And the events that were taken, created up to the film were absolutely phenomenal. But them events have been hidden in history, in video. Photography, you can't get that information today, which is a shame. Anyway, what happened was the film did not portray the dancers in a positive light, and the film was a flop itself. You hear me say a few times, we expected to be the film, we expected the film to have the longevity or to be as good as West Side Story, as good as Guys and Dolls, basically as good as the American musicals. And the Americans thought so because they're the ones who invested in it. Absolute Beginners was the biggest budget movie in history of Britain. You have to understand, there was high hopes for it because there was a lot of dance films. There's been past dance films. Britain had a great history of doing period. It was a cult movie, but they had a great history of doing cult films and doing period films because that whole idea was the 50s. The subject matter was a great subject matter. It was basically the race riots of 1958 in Nottingham, and then further on a mixed relationship. So globally, the topic was exceptional. If you think about South Africa, if you think about the past, Romeo and Juliet, all them type of things. It was written by a guy called Colin Innes. The book came from a book that was very popular by Colin Innes, an important book. It was seen as something that couldn't fail. But what failed it was Julian Temple. Julian Temple was not a filmmaker, and he should have called in people to support him. He did not. The people who did that film didn't know what they were doing, and they never identified to others. And when the Americans found out, they pulled out the budget. What happened was the production company that was supporting the film, they went bankrupt because of this film. It's important to say the acting in the film was terrible. The dancing was terrible. It was out of context. It did not show research. It didn't show development. It didn't show expertise. It didn't show excellence. It didn't show what is called a class act. It didn't show they danced in the spirit of jazz. They showed attention to detail. It didn't show that they were bebop musicians. It didn't show that they were modern magicians. I mean, that attention to detail, that I can go out and improvise to the highest level and get the quality attention to detail. It did not show that. It showed children. Julian Temple carried on like a children. He did videos. Basically, I had to agree with some of the comments that were made. Basically, the acting was shallow. It was friends of friends in a film, and they didn't think about the subject matter. So what happened was, everybody disassociated themselves with the film. They disassociated themselves with the dance. As I said, 1986 was either make it or break it. So what happened was, dance teachers had never seen UK jazz dance, saw the dance out of context first of all, didn't see why people would want to be interested in the dance, because basically the dances that were being done and how they're being portrayed, the dancers were being portrayed in a colonial way. Why would you teach your children in a colonial way? When you think about West Side Story, they've got dances, the choreographer and the filmmakers have thought about, we want these dances to last and we want other people to want to do it. This was not thought about. Everybody shunned the film and didn't want anything to do with it. Now what happened was, that was at the peak of UK jazz dance. Avant-garde, bohemian, experimental period. And so what happened was, the film never captured that. And so what happened, an opportunity for the underground culture to come to the fore, to the commercial world, was lost. And then from 1986, what happened was, a commercial focus came in. People, not really serious about jazz, but, want to be a bit cool, all came, which I call the onlookers, which were in the clubs already, started to invest in the dance. So people who saw it, the film, don't know any better, boom, 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 started to get, oh, this jazz thing's cool, boom, boom, boom. But the dancers, what was good about the dancers, people like myself and other dancers who wanted to be in the commercial world, they made decisions about, I'm going to keep this art form alive, I'm not going to make it dead. That was one of me. In 1986, I was one of the prolific, experimental, cultural, creative experimenters of engaging in dance. So what basically, I was doing ballet. I was introduced UK Jazz Dance to ballet. I introduced UK Jazz Dance to contemporary. I introduced UK Jazz Dance, experimental dance, avant-garde dance, experimental arts, theatre. Most importantly, from 83 to 86, I was working in the leading experimental project that you could ever want to work in, with an organisation called Manchester Science and Technology, who basically were basically influenced by Bauhaus. I worked with them on an amazing project from 85 to 86, but I went to see them when they first came. And I was one of two dancers in the UK, in the country, that worked with them. So you need to understand the significance of the type of projects I did between 83 and 86, were some of the groundbreaking projects ever to happen. Co-founded the first ever contemporary cooperative dance company in Manchester, which was unique. It was experimental, it was avant-garde, it was revolutionary, because it came from a Manchester youth group. It came from, and then we developed a professional company, because we realized we wanted professional dancers to be bred in Manchester and not have to go away, have to leave their families. That was one of the things that Sue Molson had. And basically, the development of the dancers was amazing. Basically, dance in the community, dance in education, dance in the theatre. And we did dance in commercial work also. And basically, we did a dance. Basically, we toured our own work. Very few dancers got to do that. Do you know what I'm saying? That was part of our development, because it basically was about our self-development, and it was us developing ourselves, bringing in specialists. So we were like a company, we're going to personalise our development to ourselves. Few companies ever did that in Manchester, and few companies did that in the country. They had one established choreographer. We were expected, if you want to choreograph, our teacher says, we'll help you and support you in doing that. It was revolutionary. Do you understand? I joined him in 86. I worked with Lem Cisse on a major project. I was commissioned to do something called Doing It Our Way, an amazing name. And I worked with Lem Cisse, did pieces, solo pieces to his new book. I worked with a percussionist called Kwasi Asante at the same time. I was working with Thomas Olajide Ojueso of Afro Kimono, he was an amazing teacher, had been in here from the 50s. He was a bebop musician. He was a modern jazz musician. He was a Afro jazz musician. He was basically Afro-Cubist on the first ever album, Afro-Cubist album ever done in Britain. Between 50 and 53, he was on it. I worked with him. I was working with him, studying under him. I was working with an amazing percussionist, Afro percussionist from the 50s also, Kwasi Asare, with his group called Cantamanto. He was playing the authentic music of Ghana, which is latte, which was spiritual music. I joined him. Why? Because what happens is, if you want to understand jazz, you have to study African, Brazilian, and Caribbean music. And I had the teachers that were here involved in historical events, which was the bebop movement in Britain, throughout Britain and outside the country. I was studying with them. I was studying with Physical State International, which was an organization doing experimental work, Western art, experimental art, music and everything. I was involved in the underground Western world of arts, the underground world of black music, underground world of Asian music. Manchester, as I said, was the most advanced, most experimental and avant-garde city in the UK in 1986. And that got lost because of Absolute Beginners, the film, because that would have came out. There'd be more interest for journalists to come to the city, not only Manchester, but all over the country. What happened in 86, which is significance, what happened, the number one DJ had a breakdown, which was number one experimental DJ called Colin Curtis had a breakdown. And what happened was, when he had a breakdown, what was not done rightly was the club that he created was basically every week he was bringing avant-garde tunes. It was a club that was very unique, played 70% obscure jazz, 30% rare groove, types of soul, etc. It's never been done before. And what happened, the significance of the club, it attracted people from all over the country and parts of the world just to come to the club. You have to understand the significance of Berlin. It was a networking ground for the best creative cultural artists in the city. That's where they met and talked, chilled out. Best place for all the dancers around the country, they all came there. And we didn't battle in that club because it was a club where he played music. It created an opportunity for us to experiment, and that's what we used it for, and to build ourselves for all days. That's how I used it. I never battled ever in that club. I used it every week. I trained myself in the week just to go to the club. Tuesday to Tuesday, I trained myself for Berlin because I knew exceptional music was going to take place. It was a club that was cosmopolitan. It was a club where males and females danced. And Manchester had a music policy where we played for females anyway in all genres of music. And it was that's why it's important that 86 is very much recognized. But 86 and all that got lost. And myself as a person, was ironic. I'm speaking here today because people are unaware to the fact, not till 8 years old, I wanted to be a barrister, to stand up for my people. And in 86, when Absolute Beginners failed us, I was already doing projects with students. I was a student myself called Student Empowering Students. I was empowering students about West Indian culture, identifying many people from overseas, homegrown, had stereotypes about African Caribbeans and who we were. And when they met us, they were surprised. They were surprised that my teacher created projects called Student Empowering Students at Adult Education, where we got international students to come, and I would share culture with them, drumming and dancing. They couldn't believe that I was into jazz. They couldn't believe that there was a jazz movement. They couldn't believe our underground sound system, our steel pan, our African drumming, our Brazilian drumming. They couldn't believe that existed because they had been given a negative about us, that we don't do anything constructive. And they were meeting me and I was bringing people, sharing with them, sharing with them the best way for us to break the stereotypes is for us, students to empower students, students to empower communities, artists empowering students and communities, is for us to share the culture that we know. Because generally in university, they don't know the underground culture. We carry it. And that was very successful. So in 1986, I started to create an exhibition. I started to gather information to show that UK jazz dance was a culture. It was a lifestyle and movement. It was unique to dancers and unique to me. I collected memorabilia to show them. There was records coming out, so I could show them Basford Jazz, street scene. I showed them the records I had and talked about the whole thing. The record collecting was about obscurity. It wasn't about collecting another record that a person had. It was basically collecting a record collection that basically suited you for your style and your development. I was not relying upon no DJ. That's the most important thing. I identified the importance of the racism that was the climate, the discrimination, the prejudice that we faces. I identified black door policies, where what happened for me to get into clubs, I had to bring white friends to get in clubs. I made deals with friends. I would teach them, white friends, I taught them to dance. for them to bring me to a club, because I couldn't, certain clubs I wanted to go to because I love to dance, I couldn't get into the club as a black person. So I had to bring a white friend, a friend of mine called Philip Gilday, used to go to school with me. I used to teach him to dance, disco